Good morning, How you doing, Mr. Lowry? Can you hear me?
Nervous, I'm doing fine.
I can understand you're being nervous. How old are you, Mr. Lowry?
55.
55. And how much time have you actually served?
I would have 20, maybe 21.
So we'll just say 20, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
This was on a vehicle burglary, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
When you were originally sentenced on the charge in 2004, what sentence did you receive?
I received 12 years on the first count and life on the second count.
You mean life on the second count? You only have one. I mean, what?
Well, excuse me. Well, the way that St. Tammany had sentenced me to 12 and run a concurrent with the life sentence as a habitual offender.
Well, when did you get treated as a habitual offender?
2004, I believe it was, or 17.
Yeah. But I'm showing you only have one burglary conviction. You originally got 12 years. And then in 2017, they came back and treated you as a habitual offender.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So you only have one burglary.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
So how much time had you served on that burglary in 2017 before they upped your sentence? How much time did you serve?
Altogether, I've done 20 on that same charge.
Okay, don't worry. Don't worry.
I'm sorry.
Well, you don't have two charges. You got two sentences on the same charge. I think you were originally sentenced to 12 years. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. I'm confused because,
What's confusing you? Help me understand what's confusing you.
well, when I went to court, I had two counts. They sentenced me to 12 years on the first count, and then they multi-billed me on the second count. I mean, unless
I see.
He does have two charges.
But they're the same number. They're the same number.
Really, because one of them is at a boat launch or something, and one of them is in a parking lot.
You had originally gotten, but they didn't multi-bill you until 2017 on the second count, right?
no, ma'am. I was originally sentenced on as a habitual offender in it was January, I think it was January, and then I went back to court and got resentenced as a third offender.
When did you go back to, how long after that did you go back to court?
13 years ago, I believe. Somewhere in there. I can't remember the exact date.
Mr. Jackson, I'm gonna let the records lady explain it to you.
Please do.
Okay, Ms. Jackson, originally, he is sentenced under 2 counts of simple burglary under docket 354193, and that was in 04.
Mhm.
Then they came back in 2017 on count 1. They separated count 1 under the same docket and multi-billed him to life under count 1 and left count 2 with the 12 years from 04.
Right, so he had been in prison 13 years before they came back and treated him as a habitual offender, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So. Okay, all right, okay. Well, so, Mr. Lowry, you were committing vehicle burglaries, is that right? Breaking in people's cars?
Yes, ma'am.
What was causing you to break into people's cars? Why were you doing that?
I believe I had a substance abuse at the time.
What kind of drugs were you on?
Cocaine.
And how long had you been addicted to cocaine?
For about 25 years, 30 years.
So how old were you when you first started using cocaine?
25. About 25 or 28, something like that. I can't remember exactly.
Do you have any kind of learning disability?
Not that I'm aware of, I believe.
Did you graduate from high school?
No, ma'am.
How far did you go in high school?
I went to the 7th grade in junior high.
Okay. And why did you drop out?
To be honest, I really don't know.
Were you working during the time that you were on cocaine? You have a job?
On and off,
What kind of work did you normally do?
roofing, sandblasting.
Okay. Were you married? Did you have any family, have any children?
Got one child, a son. He's grown now,
Okay.
but I've never been married.
Well, let's talk about what you've been doing over the last 20 years. You haven't taken a lot of programs. Why not?
When I was sentenced under the Act 138 at the time, and I know that's not an excuse. And I've worked various jobs here in the prison, and I've gotten the 100 hours, took an anger management. The 100 hours, they haven't gave me the certificate yet, but they didn't have any available. And a competency certificate for work.
But you haven't taken any kind of substance abuse treatment, right?
No, ma'am, I was waiting to get in a class for that, but I haven't been eligible to get in one yet.
Is it because of your sentence?
Ma'am?
Is it
Okay.
Is it because of what the class were you trying to get into?
The one for the, well, just one period. It doesn't, I mean, one that helps me the best, really. Living in balance.
And your job is a farm animal worker?
I work at Camp J now.
Okay, how long have you been, what do you do at Camp J?
I work in the tool shed, and I keep up the grass and paint and whatever they ask.
And I see you have only had one write-up, and that was in 2005.
Yes, ma'am.
And that was for a contraband. You have any memory of what that was about?
No, ma'am, not the contraband. The only thing I remember is the one write-up I had was for, they sent me down to go clean and with a water hose, and I GI'd the building and they wet the camera system up. That's the only write-up I recall happened.
Okay. You have any I know you mentioned your son. Do you have any family that would help you if you were to be released?
I was trying to go through the parole project to try to get into a transitional housing because I do not have anybody on the outside. I've lost contact with everybody since I've been incarcerated.
What kind of job do you think you can have on the outside?
Roofing, painting, sandblasting, weed eating, whatever it requires me to do what I'm supposed to do in society.
Warren Mo, any information you can give us about Mr. Lowry?
Yes, Mr. Laurie, he's in T4C, thank you for a change. He started that class in February, so he shouldn't have too much longer to finish that. And he's on the waiting list for living in balance. His tiger is low, and only one DB report, and that was for aggravated, disobedience and property destruction.
Okay. Okay, it was, I had one DB, not DB for a rule one. Okay.
So they wrote one DB report, but they had two, different, infractions on it. They had a 5 and 17.
And when I wrote down DB, I put one, meaning he only had one. But then when I looked at it, I thought it was a rule one, but it wasn't a rule. So that was
Okay.
one.
All right.
All right, that's all I have, Mr. Rushing.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Mr. Lowry,
Yes, sir.
have you formally contacted the Louisiana Pro Project?
I was given the address from an attorney, and when I wrote them, she had applied me with the wrong address, and I received the letter back. So I had sent the letter with a friend from up here when the Pro Project was up here, and he had gave them the letter. And I believe Ms. Barton was supposed to contact them for me.
Now, if you were to be released in the near future, do you have a transition plan? Do you have a place to live?
At this time, I do not. I'm trying to get that established with the Parole Project. And I
Chairman
haven't,
Roche, excuse me, we just got a text from Andrew Huntley saying that he would take him if he's granted.
That's correct.
Yes,
Okay, that's what I needed to hear.
yes, sir.
Mr. Freeman?
Mr. Lowry, did you ever try to take your GED while you've been incarcerated?
no, sir.
So
I didn't know what.
Sir, he took the D-level TAGE test on 7/24/2012, but he did not enroll in education services afterward. So he has no other educational history.
Okay, thank you, Warren.
Welcome.
Mr. Lowry,
Yes, sir.
would you like to make a brief statement and tell us why we should release you early?
Yes, sir, because I believe I could be a productive person out in society. And not commit any more crimes or hurt anybody else's vehicles or victims or anything like that. And do the best I can with what I can out there by working.
Yes, sir. Is the panel ready to vote?
Yeah. All right, Mr. Lowry, you've served an awful long time, an awfully long time. You've had a good institutional record, you're a good worker. You got fair because you didn't have any enough programs. You've only had one write-up, and that was in 2005. So my vote today would be to grant conditionally upon completion of a long-term substance abuse treatment program. Since you've never really had any substance abuse treatment, I think you need to have that under your belt before you release. And also conditionally upon acceptance by the Parole Project of your case, so that they can work with you to find transitional housing to help you reintegrate into. My vote is to grant conditionally, complete a long-term substance abuse program, be accepted by the parole project.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. Mr. Freeman.
Mr. Lowry, I agree with Ms. Jackson. You have served an extraordinary amount of time for 2 car burglaries. You have done well over there as far as discipline. I wish you had a little bit more classes. But I also vote to grant conditionally on you completing that substance abuse program and being accepted into the parole project.
Thank you.
Mr. Lowry,
Yes, sir.
it looks like you might get some relief this morning and get the much needed help you need with your substance abuse issues.
Yes, sir.
My vote is the same. To grant conditionally upon completing a long-term substance abuse program. There are many programs, but we're gonna leave it up to DOC to pick the right one for you. And then the other condition is acceptance in the Louisiana Parole Projects Program. Conditions after release. We have a curfew from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. You must attend at least 3 NAAA meetings a week. And you have to follow all recommendations of the substance abuse treatment program that you're going to complete before release. Do you understand the conditions?
Yes, sir.
Your early release has been granted. You have a good day.
Some of you may remember this hearing, but probably most of you don't. It has fewer than 2,000 views. I did it like a year ago, and I was thinking about this hearing, and I wanted to do it again because, frankly, I think this is one of the important ones to show. The idea that a man is given a life sentence for breaking into cars. And it's just dumbfounding, right? We see over and over and over and over. We can't even keep count about how many who change the course of a child's life through their sick, perverted acts, and they get little slap on their wrist sentences. And here a DA felt like, oh wow, we should give him a life. You know, there was confusion. Like Miss Jackson is Bonnie Jackson, who understands the system probably better than anyone in Louisiana, or as good as anyone, and she couldn't quite understand it. How was it possible that he had received a 12-year sentence, but somehow, and I understand her confusion, but somehow he was still in prison when he should have been out when they gave him the life sentences, when they adjudicated him an habitual offender. But I think where the confusion was is that they adjudicated him an habitual offender immediately, and perhaps something to do with his appeals, although that's not is why there's confusion on the dates. But even then, I don't see that here because it shows that the appeal was decided in 2004. So it could be some type of paperwork challenge. If they didn't and a DA actually came back when he's like about to get out and said, hey, I think we should make you an habitual offender, that would be even that. Really, that's what I thought happened, because that would even emphasize how more insane it is, right? But it's not clear. What is clear, though, is that he did get that life sentence. So on June 29th of 2002 at 7:33 a.m., Corporal Jeffrey and Sergeant, you imagine when they arrested this guy, they knew that they'd be locking him up for life. A police department responded to a reported disturbance at a Walmart store located in Louisiana. The employee at the Walmart store flagged down the sergeant and reported an argument between a male and a female patron. The officers discovered that the source of the disturbance was an argument between a male and female patron. The defendant and a female identified herself as Regina Clark. The defendant started stated that he had a valid Louisiana's driver's license under the name given. However, asserts should not indicate the issuance of the Louisiana driver's license under the name given by the defendant. Additional efforts to obtain the license. A female stated that she only knew the defendant as Eddie, did not know his last name. While performing a pat-down search, the officers visually observed a checkbook in the defendant's right rear pocket. The checks inside the checkbook bore the name of Joel Clifton. The defendant informed the officers that the checkbook belonged to a friend who had left in the defendant's vehicle. Sergeant Gallagher called the telephone number listed under the checks and spoke with the relative of Joel Clifton. The officers further detained the defendant and advised him of his Miranda rights. Joel Clifton returned the telephone call to the sergeant, and arrangements were made for Clifton to come to the scene to identify his property. At that point, the defendant admitted that his name was Edward Lowry and not Eddie Smith. Sergeant Gallagher inspected the outside of the vehicle being used by the subjects. Although the vehicle was a red Pontiac Firebird, an owner's manual for a Ford brand vehicle was inside the vehicle in plain view. Other items, what? Although the vehicle was a red Firebird, an owner's manual for a Ford brand vehicle was... Okay, why would they take the... okay, let's see how this plays out. Other items were in plain view in the vehicle, included a stereo, faceplate, stereo owner's manual. The manual and faceplate were of different brands, and the stereo installed in the vehicle. When Clifton arrived at the scene, he verified that the checkbook found that the defendant was his checkbook, that he had been reported stolen after his vehicle was burglarized. A female cell known to the officers as Regina consented to search the automobile. The consent search was executed. The officers recovered several items that were identified by Clifton as stolen from his vehicle. Those items included compact disc, a pocket knife, medicine bag, grooming kit, and dart set. Look at that. This wonderful collection of items cost him his life in prison. Additional checks belonging to Clifton were also recovered from the vehicle. Several of the items located in the vehicle subsequently identified Melissa Gigolo as having been her property and stolen from the vehicle. These items included registration papers, Gigolo's vehicle, a cell phone bill, a Panasonic stereo faceplate, remote control, a wonderful collection of useless stuff. The officers ultimately determined that there was an outstanding attachment to the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office for the rest of the defendant and the female placed under arrest. A paycheck stub bearing the name of Joel and Clifton and insurance cards that Clifton's vehicle was located in the female's purse. Why would they keep this stuff on them, you know? When it was searched in the incident of the arrest, Louisiana driver's license bearing the name Regina Clark was also located in the female's purse. Detective Robert Judge of St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office conducted the follow-up investigation concerning the burglary in the vehicle. Gigolo and Clifton. Detective Judge ultimately determined that the identity of the female who formerly identified herself as Regina Clark to be Pamela Alfonso. That's a cool name, Pamela Alfonso. I wonder where they came up with Regina Clark. During the trial, Alfonso admitted in her presence and participation in the burglary of both vehicles. The burglary of Gigolo vehicle took place on June 27, 2002. To think that was over 22 years ago. 2 days prior to the instant arrest, Gigolo was an employee at the same Walmart in Slidell, and her vehicle was parked in Walmart parking lot when the burglary took place. So they, all right. So they do bring up some interesting appeals here, which is, wait a minute, did he have a right to frisk him, right? Which is an interesting thing. To think that this all started because they were arguing in front of the Walmart. You know, they weren't even caught doing a crime, like, per se. They were just arguing so bad that someone the employee called the cops on them. And then that led to all of this. If you can even imagine. I mean, he was going to end up in this situation regardless, but it's like, if you're going to go down, you might as well not go down for life for having an argument in a parking lot of a Walmart. A police officer who stops a person pursuant to Article 215.1 may conduct a limited pat-down frisk for weapons if reasonably believes that he's in danger or suspect is armed. It's worth a shot to appeal on those bases. But where does he appeal on the life sentence? Let's see. The original bill of information, the defendant, one count of simple burglary. The state later amended the bill to add a second count. The record does not include a rearrangement after the second count was added. However, the defendant's appeal brief states that the defendant entered a not guilty plea to the amended bill of information on date of amendment May 7, 2003. The minutes state that the sentence imposed in count 2 is to be served consecutive to sentence imposed in count 1. However, the sentence transcript states the sentence are to be served concurrently. When there is discrepancy between the minutes of the transcript and the transcript must prevail. It seems not even clarity on his initial sentence. I don't know. I mean, I'm quite confused. I think as everyone still is. Over here on this appeal, it says that he was charged with 2 counts of simple burglary. He entered a plea of not guilty. He wanted to suppress evidence. They didn't. After trial, the jury defendant was found guilty. I think the jury had any idea that they could be sentencing him to life. The state filed a multiple offender bill. Subsequently, they filed a multiple offender bill. He was adjudicated, it says here, a 4th felony offender. As to 1 count as a 4th felony offender, the defendant was sentenced to life imprisonment and hardly without the benefit of parole. Louisiana, you can't make this stuff up. How can you send this man to life? And you know what? The reason he has a chance of parole is because it's Act 122, which is what Act 122 you would say is, yes, that is Act 122. And the irony of it is that the parole project somehow couldn't even show up to his hearing. I know they say his address was wrong, his attorney. This guy just seems to be getting screwed by his attorneys over and over or something like that. But this is the poster child for the Louisiana Parole Project, yet we see them handling the worst of the worst of the worst. And this is what Act 122 was written for, but sadly, we don't see a lot of cases that you feel good about Act 122. I mean, he's really been he's serving 20 years on really stealing a bunch of stuff from a car. It's nuts. I don't have any record of having violent history, don't have any record of sexual assault, don't have any record of that, but still the state wanted so desperately to lock him up for life. And what is so disturbing about this is we have seen over and over and over and over how even at the same date of his sentencing, it's nothing to do with where they don't care about children. And it just blows one's mind. But I wanted to redo this hearing because, again, I thought this is an important one to share. And I may bring this up and throw it into a few of the really bad hearings just as a comparison. But thank you, Richard. And with that, I'll let you go.